Hello, in this video I'm going to show you how I made my St. Patrick's Day coat. I made it using craft wool and wool roving to make the shamrock. I affixed the colors using a felting needle and mat. I used a Flora NeoPixels and conductive thread for the electronics. First I cut out the craft wool in the shape of a shamrock, and then I used the wool roving and the felting needle to affix the different colors to the craft wool. Here I am working at high speed. I wish I could do that all the time, but it's really fun to affix the wool roving to the craft wool, and I think it's nice to work in electronics on something that you can work on outside of the wearable and then affix to the wearable. For me, it's easier this way. So I did the colors of the Irish flag on a shamrock, and that's where I affixed all my NeoPixels. The first thing I did was set up the NeoPixels and used a little tiny bit of glue to affix them in the right locations, making sure I had all the inputs going the right way. Then I cut out my heart and I used a photoresistor. The idea of this project is I'm going to cover my heart and then the NeoPixels will light up. I use flexible wire when I do projects that have the electronics so far apart. It's too hard with the thread to do it that way. I do use the conductive thread on the shamrock, and it's nice working with the NeoPixels because there's only one signal line. So you attach ground, your voltage, and your signal. And then I tie off the input ends and use a tiny little bit of nail polish. I then made sure everything worked. Luckily it did. And I use alligator clips to hook it up to the Flora when I'm doing my programming. I then got it so that if I hit the photoresistor, the lights went on. So then I started tweaking the programming and changing it. I affixed my flexible wires to the first NeoPixel, and then I took a little more of the wool roving and I covered over each NeoPixel. This helps diffuse the light on the shamrock. I was careful not to get too close to the conductive thread, but I'm sure I touched it a few times and it didn't bother it. Everything continued to work, luckily. So I got all the NeoPixels covered over, and it just looks like a shamrock until the lights go on. You can still see the conductive thread. And then, because the project is on both sides of the jean jacket, I have the flexible wire, and I used a good amount and made a little pocket out of jean material, and then I fed the wires through that so that I wouldn't hit the wires every time I put the jacket in and on and off. I then had to solder the resistor to the wires for the photoresistor to work, and then use the little pieces of plastic to melt onto the connections. And then I used some thread to keep the wires in one little spot, but it was kind of loose. I put all the electronics into the pocket and used one of the small batteries. I cut a little hole, and that way the on-off button of the Flora, I can just reach through the jean jacket. I keep the top of the Flora up so I could reprogram and charge the battery. I'm relatively new to electronics, so still make tons of mistakes. This one I've made before. The conductive wires are bare, so you have to be really careful how you handle them. I had them on the counter, was working with them, and then suddenly smelled burning because, as you can see right there, 2 wires connected. And then I actually burnt out the first NeoPixel and had to replace it. It's better practice to try to tape down your conductive thread so it doesn't move. Second mistake I made on this one was when I was working with my resistor, I put the little plastic piece over the resistor while I was doing my soldering, thinking I could just slide it over, but of course I couldn't because it melted in place. So I had to put in a new resistor. But it all worked out, and here's my finished product. I hope to wear it on St. Patrick's Day. Hope you have a great one.